Minnesota podcast where we honor those who served and their families. I'm your host, Trent Dilks. Back with me for the third segment is co-host Mike McElhiney and Brad Williams, real estate agent, veteran, and all-around decent-sounding person. Welcome back, Brad.
Wow, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
That is the greatest compliment I've ever received.
Hey, you sound decent.
I need to get a copy of this.
Yeah, you know, you can put that on your reviews.
Right?
People say
that'll be my one.
Yep. Sounds decent. All right. You know,
not horrible.
I'm thinking back to segment 2, and before we move on to some of our other topics, I wanted to cover, I know during the really hot buying times, right, when people were doing crazy shit like sight unseen, 10%, 20% over asking.
Giving their firstborn.
Yeah, exactly. They're offering like favors to the sellers, like all sorts of stuff.
All kinds of illegal stuff.
Oh, it was bad. The rumor out there was that the VA home loan was too encumbered. It was too slow. It was a dinosaur. In a time when people were making bad decisions as fast as they could, the VA was forcing them to slow down, and so sellers were looking away from them. Any truth to that? Anything you can kind of enlighten? What's going on?
I will say, and this is a national fact, it was a very challenging time for many buyers. And that was buyers that had conventional financing, FHA financing, VA financing, cash financing. It was challenging because if there were 20 offers on a home, only one got it.
Yeah.
And the other 19 weren't VA loans. So I don't want to gloss over the challenge that it was for all buyers. But here's some things that many people would find surprising. And even so, sellers would find this surprising. Most of the listing agents would find this surprising. But if you know this and you go into a market like this armed with this knowledge, it can help you. The VA loan has the lowest default rate of any loan program. Like we're talking like foreclosure, like the lowest default rate of conventional FHA, right? Veterans are more likely to pay their bills. That's what that stat tells me. That doesn't necessarily help you get into the home. But here's one that does. From an underwriting perspective, the VA loan financing falls through less than any other financing type. So if somebody has a pre-approval for VA and somebody has a pre-approval for conventional, the VA is going to close more often than the conventional. And if you can tell a listing agent that, but then they're going to say, yeah, but your buyer went over $20,000, which you can do on VA, just so you know. It needs to appraise for that. But the listing agent is going to say, yeah, it's just never going to appraise for that. I say, well, let me just remind you that the appraiser is not just a VA loan appraiser. They're also a conventional loan appraiser. They're also an FHA loan appraiser. They don't look at it differently from a value perspective just because it's VA.
Yeah,
right?
You're going to have this problem.
They might look for some minimum property requirements, but if you educate yourself on them and you say, hey, and I tell them that, I've been through the home, I don't see anything that's going to be an issue with this. And then also, if, for example, the property appraises low, which can happen with any loan type, all right, and I've seen it with all the loan types, the VA is the only one that, by the book, gives you 2 opportunities to appeal it. And I've had 2 that we have appealed this year alone and 1. But here's the thing. There's also another example. Like it'll say you can appeal it twice. I had a veteran buying a home, and he was building this home. And this price point was pushing $1 million. And the veteran was also using a special adaptive housing grant. He's an amputee, like missing the leg. And he had $119,000 in earnest money on this property because the builder was willing to build it without using any construction loan. But the builder told him from the beginning, if we can't close, I'm keeping this money. I'm building this specially adapted house for you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep. Buyer
knew the risk. We get the appraisal. The appraisal is $78,000 low. $78,000 low. This veteran's about to lose $119,000 because the builder's not going to come down on their price. First appeal, lost. Second appeal, lost. Appeal it to the regional loan center a third time, lost.
It's a lot of
Fourth
losing.
time.
It's a lot of
Fourth
losing.
time. We made a great case, and they reevaluated it, and they increased the value $78,000. You know, and that veteran got to keep their $119,000. So the point is, back to your original question, it's the only one that gives you these different recourses to appeal. So like you can tell your seller, like, hey, if we get a low appraisal, I'm going to appeal it. I'm going to appeal it.
Yeah.
So sorry.
On that scenario, though, so you're saying this veteran, without approval of a loan ahead of time, made a deal whereby they were going to be, $120,000 on the hook for $1 million house that they may or may not have had the funds to pay for? Is that what?
Yeah, without getting into too much of the
doesn't
details,
sound
when
good.
It sounds like a veteran decision. Look, this is
you know.
targeted at veterans, and this was a veteran decision. I support it.
Yeah, there was a lot more complications to that than I would go into on this podcast.
Yeah.
But it was a risk that was weighed, and it was completely, for lack of a better term, it was asinine that the appraiser wasn't meeting the value.
But what you're talking
But,
about too
yeah.
with the appeals, you're
You can appeal
appealing the amount that the VA is going to back from your
And that's
whichever
that's
bank.
that's the most drastic
Yeah.
case that I can come up with that I had involvement
Can you
with.
request a different appraiser? Can
No, you don't really have that kind of
any-
control because, after the mortgage collapse, that 2008 era, the Dodd-Frank Act put some things into place to keep from us as professionals from influencing the appraiser, which were those were good things.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, unless you got a bad appraiser, and then and the next thing you know, you got to rent a bobcat. But
yeah, exactly.
tear up your neighbor's yard.
yeah, yep. And but that kind of opens the door. Mike, you wanted to ask about.
Well, yeah. So I get some questions too about guys had a VA loan. They may or may not be in the same marriage, but let's just say for this scenario, they're still married, but they paid their loan off, and now they want to start another one. But they finished up. They paid Wells Fargo or whoever off, and now they're looking to buy a second property. Do they have to go? I mean, does the reconciliation occur when they seek a new pre-approval, or do they have to do some kind of reconciliation at the end of
the loan officer, the mortgage broker, whoever they're working with, should do that and restore entitlement for them to show like, yes, this one's paid off, and then they're going to go back to the VA. Now they might have to get like a settlement statement showing that was paid off or paid in full thing from the mortgage company, and then then they have their entitlement again. They can go.
But
use
do
it.
they send that stuff back to the VA? I'm just thinking to myself too. I had to go through this whole situation with Hennepin County. Now I'm the owner, blah blah blah, and send some stuff down there. But I don't think I ever, did anything to finalize with VA.
Well, you typically wouldn't until you're ready to use your entitlement again. So
okay.
then you're going to go through the same process, and the documents that they request then, because they've already proved your eligibility for the VA loan once, so they're probably not going to ask for military qualifying documents. But if they can't see that it's been paid off, then you're probably providing a mortgage payoff.
Well, then who does the veteran call? Do they call VA? Do they go down to the Whipple building? Do they call their original loan
Well, I mean,
underwriter?
You can call the regional loan center, and they're going to help the veteran. That's what they're there for.
Yeah.
They might direct them. They might say, if you don't know how to do this, contact your CVSO,
Oh, yeah,
right?
right.
And then the CVSO, maybe they're contacting the regional loan center.
Yeah.
I mean, what I would do personally is I would contact a loan officer that I trust and say, can you, because they have, it's like WebLGY or something, this portal that lenders have a direct link to the regional loan center certificate of eligibility department.
They do this for free? Do I got to pay a fee? I don't like fees.
You should not be charged a fee to do this. You should not be charged a fee to do this. If they're charging you a fee to do this, go somewhere else. I'm quite certain that's probably illegal.
Oh yeah.
But
Good to know.
So
there's way more fun illegal things to do than pay a fee.
I'm not robbing fees. So real clear here. You can use it more than once.
Absolutely.
And this is a huge misunderstanding. People don't understand they can use it more than once. I have a house right now under the VA home loan. I sell that thing. Or here's one. I want to keep it. I want to keep it and I want to rent out.
Yeah. So to be absolutely clear, and then this is a misconception that I see typically older veterans have. Yeah, it's a great loan program, but I used it in '83 after I got out of the Corps. Can't use it again. It's like, well, you can. Okay. So you can use it more than once. You can use it multiple times. There's actually no limit on how many times you can use it. You might be able to use it multiple times without even selling the previous property. Now, we're not going to math this out because, every year this number changes based on conforming loan limits. But, basic example. Let's say you bought a home for $200,000 and you want to buy another one for $400,000. In nearly every county in the U.S., you can do that VA zero down both times. In Minnesota, I tell you, you can.
Okay.
Right? Now, you can even go over, if those two go over a certain amount, it might require a small down payment.
So,
Excellent.
yeah, now, again, so a lot of questions. I know you kind of covered this, but so, you know, I think you said in another episode, there's no max. You know, so it's kind of based.
If you're using it, like let's say you don't have another VA loan, you don't have any VA loans, whether or not you're using it for the first time, or whether or not you've already used it and you paid off that one in that one example that you were giving, if you qualify for the lender's overlays, so I'm going to rewind here. The VA doesn't set a cap, a dollar amount that you can go zero down on.
No
The
cap,
VA
as the kids would say.
Yeah, no cap. So the VA doesn't put a limit. Now a lender can say we only lend up to $2 million. You know, zero down.
How am I even supposed to live in a house for?
I don't know.
Okay,
I don't
but
know.
okay,
With all
$2
your best
million.
friends.
And not to cut you off, but so that gets into my other question. So let's just say, you know, veterans working at 3M or for a private communications firm, and they're pulling in $500,000, and they buy a house at $250,000, and you know, a lender would obviously lend them another $250,000 for another house. Can you have two VA loans at the same time if your income meets that?
Yeah, you could. Yes. And now we're gonna make sure that you had occupied that first one for the occupancy requirement that they have. Generally is 12 months.
Okay. Okay.
But yeah, so buy one home. You can go out there. Here's a very specific example. A veteran here in Minnesota, they have an investment property up in the St. Cloud area. They bought it for somewhere around $200,000. They wanted to buy another home in the metro because they got moved, and that was around $600,000. So let's say the total of those two was $800,000. The limit at the time, I believe, was like $766,000 and some change, right? So the total is a little over that, right? So other lenders might tell them you don't qualify to use a VA loan on that. They just had to put down 25% of that overage amount, right? So, like, you can even go above that when you start stacking these above, but it might require a little bit of down payment.
Yeah.
You know what I love most about this conversation?
Math.
Is the math.
Yeah, and
The
that's what
math,
I know. I
you
want to
know?
avoid that, but I just want to say,
No,
I mean,
I-
it's not necessarily a hard no. You can use it more than once. There are scenarios where you might be able to have. Well, we'll stop there.
Yeah, well, you know, you make 7% of your 12%, and bam, right there. You know, you got
Yeah,
it.
and
So you've
carry the
made it.
one.
Exactly.
Carry the one.
So,
But back to your original question, it's going to be up to the lender.
Yeah.
Like,
Okay.
because again, the VA is not doing this, right? It's going to be up to the lender on what their overlays are, and some have like no. I mean, if you're a veteran, you're executive at 3M, you give the example, and you qualify from the debt to income and their residual income calculation that they use, then they can finance that.
you said veteran executive at 3M. You know what popped in my head?
What's that?
Air Force. I bet that.
I know a Marine.
The smart ones.
Right away, I just pictured an Air Force veteran. It's like, yeah, that is not from the Army.
And so here's another question that's kind of common. I mean, there are, dual military spouses out there, and they'll both use a GI Bill based on their income. It's still, or not GI, well, they're, GI Bill, home loan. But, what happens when they divorce if they used a singular, I guess, VA home, backed home loan? It's still the lender. So there's still that joint income, and now you're down to half the income. I mean, is it as simple as refinancing? Is it what if the spouse
sometimes.
wants to go get another one because they're a veteran?
And they may be able to. I direct people to call their loan servicer. Like whoever you make your payments to, call them and explain the situation. They might have one veteran assume the whole mortgage from the other and releasing that entitlement. But I mean, you're going to be talking to loan servicers. You're going to be talking to your divorce attorney. What's in divorce decree? Because sometimes it's just directed that it's sold.
Yeah.
So it's a little too complicated to give like a standard boilerplate answer
Okay.
for that. But I have seen refinances, I've seen assumptions, I've seen it directed to be sold, I've seen refinances, cash out refinances, paying off the other spouse with equity. So
yeah, there's all sorts of fun options when you're going through that, and I expect by my second or third one, I'll have them all.
I think you should have it down by then.
Down pat, and I'll know exactly how. I can't wait for that. I don't want to let this opportunity pass without talking about the recent lawsuit. Here's what I know about it. I'm kind of an expert. Somebody sued somebody, and depending on what I read, it's either very good for people who are buying homes or very bad. And all I really know is, boy, we really got them real estate agents, or oh no, this is really bad. So I'm not exactly sure what I think about it, but I know it's either good or bad.
I think you're ready to be like editor-in-chief of the Harvard Law Review.
What are you even talking about? I've never
the
heard
real
of it.
estate agents. They got. Oh, hold on. Let me recap for them because obviously I know more than the real estate agent.
I haven't heard this story.
You probably do.
Somebody got sued. Yeah. So if you want to take it from there.
Yeah. Thank you for setting me up on that.
Yeah.
So exactly what he said. The end.
The end. Yeah.
Yeah. There was a recent lawsuit that involved the National Association of Realtors. Long story short, up until, well, it's not even in effect yet, even though the guidance has been published. A veteran is not allowed to pay agent commissions, right? You can't pay a broker administrative commission. You can't pay your buyer's agent commission. The veteran is not allowed to pay it or be charged it. It's not like they can be billed for it and the seller pay for it through the concessions, right? That has always been the case. The recent lawsuit and the settlement states that multiple listing services, like where homes essentially are listed, we are not going to be able to publish cooperating broker compensation. What that means is, traditionally speaking, the sellers, via their seller's agent, are paying the buyer's agent's commission. Like if I represent a buyer, the seller's paying, let's use 6% commission as an example. And let's say the seller's agent's going to get 3% of that. And then they're going to give the other 3% to like my brokerage that I work for, right? And then they have a split with me as the agent. That's been traditional. Now, I expect that that's still going to be the case.
And don't we call that closing costs?
No, it hasn't been a closing cost up until this point. So that's been the traditional way, and it's likely to still be the way. That can still be done. But the change that's happened, one of the most significant pieces of this change, this lawsuit, this settlement, is that the amount of compensation that the seller was paying through their broker to come to my broker has always been published on the website, the multiple listing service. That can, starting in the next month or so, depending on when this is published, this podcast, that is no longer allowed nationally. It can't be publicly listed. So when so that puts a buyer's agent or a buyer could put a buyer at a disadvantage because the veteran wasn't allowed to pay the commission. So a lot of sellers have kind of taken this to think, well, they don't necessarily have to pay the buyer's agent's commission anymore. But that's not the case. They still can choose to. It's always been voluntary. It's just not publicly out there. But what the VA has done, they've just published, I think on June 11th or something like that. They came out with a new VA circular, and it said that if the multiple listing service, essentially, if it can't list that, then the buyer, the veteran, is allowed to pay it. Now, I don't suspect that many buyers are going to have to pay that, right? I think it's generally going to be business as usual with the sellers, knowing that in order to appeal to the most people, that they're going to keep paying that compensation.
Well, what's the advantage or disadvantage of paying this, fee or commission?
No, and I get it. So, because it's like, well, why? How are we giving the veteran an advantage by telling them they can pay this buyer's agent's commission? It levels the playing field. That's the only reason behind it. The VA needed to do that so they didn't put the veteran buyer at a disadvantage because a conventional buyer can. Now, it's Brad Williams' theory only that there's going to be less than 1% of buyers are ever going to have a problem with any of this and have to do this.
I've always kind of wondered.
They didn't want to handicap the veteran buyer beyond.
I know. I've always kind of wondered, as I've only been a buyer, not a seller. I've always kind of wondered about that, though, Mike. What happens here? I'm looking for the best deal I can get. If everybody's working on a percentage based, right? And I didn't know they knew what percentage they were going to get or how that split was going to come out. is my, I don't know. It felt like a little bit of a mixed, who are you serving here? If you're my buyer's agent and, you're looking for
Right,
the
'cause
highest
it's kind
percentage.
of like they get 3, the seller gets 3, the buyer gets 3.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's closing costs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all wrapped
Yeah,
in.
buy
You
the
don't
house.
And
know.
generally, from a seller's perspective, that would be considered closing costs.
Yeah.
So if that was your question earlier, then yes, that's generally wrapped up under the closing costs.
Not Brad.
Not from the buyer's
But not
closing
Brad
costs.
here, not Brad. But some of the sketchier people that are in real estate, I would start to worry a little bit as a buyer's real estate agent. Hey, I want a $400,000 house, and he keeps showing me $500,000 houses, right? What was
Well,
the
that'd be
motivation?
a flag right there. You can't
Right.
do
Yeah.
math. How
Yeah.
are you going to do my
Yeah. And they got-
75 pages
well,
of documents?
Right.
3%. I took college algebra 4 times. I know math good. 3%
Me
of
good
5.
math.
Yep. 3% of 500,000 is a better payday at the end of the process than 3% of 400,000.
yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So
Yeah. And I think that's, across any profession, you're
Oh,
going to find
absolutely.
people that would be willing to exploit others,
Yeah.
right? The bottom line is the VA, and I'm glad that they made the change. I don't think it's going to be necessary, but it would have been them being archaic, in my opinion, had they not made the change, because there's no need to put the veteran buyer at a disadvantage. Because the veteran buyer, they don't have to pay the commission, because they will know going into that whether or not they would have to do that.
Yeah.
Right. And so if I have a veteran come to me and they don't have the funds or they don't want to pay the buyer's agent commission, then I'll just make sure that they're aware of that. And we're going to be looking at in my opinion, the 99% of homes that are still going to do that. But the VA just leveled the playing
what
field.
impressed me about this, I did know a little bit more about it because I saw when that came out last week. What impressed me is the VA moved fast.
For VA,
yeah.
I mean, we're talking like they got this done in a couple months.
Yeah,
Which,
and-
I mean, honestly was remarkable. I was surprised that they got it done that fast.
For them to come up with this memorandum or circular about
Yep.
this, and I understand there will be a deeper change in
Yeah.
the rules that'll have to take place and go
Yeah.
through the bureaucracy, but the VA jumped pretty quick on this.
And I want to be clear, just based on the publication time of this podcast, the effective date that this can be done is sometime in August. So it's not like right now, June 20th, that a VA buyer can pay commission. But
So on that note, though, I mean, to the end user, the veteran, what does that really mean for me? I'm going to pay a couple
No,
extra percentage
they don't-
points,
it doesn't-
or I can choose not to.
yeah, they can choose not to. It just says that if the seller is not willing to pay your buyer's agent commission, I mean, the agent is not working for free, right?
And when do they find that out, though? Like once
Well,
they accept the offer?
No,
I mean, because
no, they're good. They need to know that before then, and their
Yeah.
real estate agent should be doing that work for
Okay.
them. So, what's going to happen on my front now? The commission, the buyer broker compensation, which is what that is called, can be publicly listed. So the company I work for, which I don't need to put a plug in for that, they're going to have it for our listings. It's going to be on our public website. It's going to be right there, so that if we have the home listed, we can put that on there. Now, other brokerages can do that as well. There just can't be a centralized place for that. And I don't even want to get into the
Yeah.
why.
I mean, yeah, who's really even
well,
looking at that kind of stuff?
you know who
it's
is the real estate, the realtor who goes sort by and goes highest percentage for
Yeah, and I mean, I can honestly tell you, I have never personally seen or heard of that happening.
Yep.
Because, I mean, it really just comes down to most of the people in most professions are there doing it because they enjoy it. They like taking care of people. They like that specific field. Now, there's a certain percentage that I'm sure are psychopath or sociopath and all that stuff, right? But like people are just are doing their job,
Yeah,
and generally, the compensation varies a little bit by different properties, but
So this is a lot of neat talk, but again, I'm a simple guy, and so at the end of the day, I guess I'm just kind of wondering if it's detrimental, because the way I understand this is there's an additional fee that's typically charged that now, if you're getting a VA loan, you can say, I don't want to pay that. So at the end of the day, the seller is not going to make quite as much, right? So is the seller now in a better position to say, well, I'm going to lose out on $2,000 that I have to pay in my closing. So how exactly?
I think as it pertains to this, we have never talked. I've never heard anyone talk about how conventional buyers can pay the buyer's agent commission, or FHA buyers can pay the buyer's agent commission, or the rural development finance buyers can pay the buyer's agent's commission. But the veterans have never been able to. So all the VA did is say, well, you can do it just like everybody else, even though nobody has been doing it.
So if you're very sophisticated, this might matter to you. But otherwise, if you're, I don't know, I bought 3 homes. I've never even heard of this. It's like, who cares?
And exactly, because it's probably going to it's probably going to continue that exact same way.
I remember
Okay.
I remember the home buying
So
process. A bunch of nerds come into the room. They have 47 pages of documents. I initial 26 times. I don't read anything. I don't read shit. I just initial as fast as I can. Somebody gives another person, the seller, an envelope with a check. I get something that says I now owe like 2 lifetimes worth of money. Boom. I got keys.
And,
we go.
You're nerdy into this, Trent, because you don't want to rent a Bobcat again. I see
I was
that.
going to say, So the VA just leveled the playing field. That's what they did. And they're not responsible for any of that change. All they did was caught up to what was going on in like the legal realm nationally.
I hate to do it. This has been an absolutely wonderful conversation. I will tell you, down the road, we're going to have a part 2 for this.
Yeah.
There's so much more to this. Brad, I want to give you an opportunity here, last 30 seconds. Anything you'd like, a parting shot for your fellow veterans, both our listeners out there, and you and Andy's mom.
Well, to Andy's mom, I'd like to say,
Hey.
no, I mean, just make sure that you're working with somebody that knows the VA loan. You know, if you heard of anything that runs counter to what I've said here today, you know, do a little bit more investigating into it. You know, you can reach out to me. I know we'll have my contact information in the description. You can find me at vabrad.com. I mean, and if you like, I like to be stumped. So send me the ones that stump somebody. I'm happy to help you, your realtor, or your mortgage broker in any way that I can.
And on that, do we have like the 1-800 number for the VA loan office?
No, but what I would say is Google VA Regional Loan Center and then contact the one that your state, you know, for this Midwest region, we got St. Paul.
Yeah.
Right. But there's going to be several across the country. You know, contact that one and then they'll get you taken care of. They are, I will say that, you know, the VA in general gets a bad rap. It's kind of like what you do, you diss on it, right? Sometimes. The VA Regional Loan Center is exceptional at taking care of veterans. They are truly exceptional.
All right. Well, that's all we have time for. I want to thank Brad again, Brad Williams, for joining us, Mike McElhiney, co-host, and earlier in the show, Andy Trino, for their expertise in this. We will continue this conversation in a future installment of Veterans of the North. Be sure to tune in. In the meantime, stay connected by subscribing, following us on social media, and visiting our website at davmn.org. Got questions or stories to share? We'd love to hear from you. Take care, and let's keep supporting our veterans.